Hello everyone, you're warmly welcome to Child Health Issues with Dr. Adoma Odami. Today we're going to talk about an issue that is very troubling, it's very worrisome, and it's unfortunately more common than we would like to believe. People don't talk about it because we feel that if we don't talk about it, then it doesn't exist. But it exists, it's real, it's happening in our homes, in our families, in our churches, in our schools, in our mosques. It's out there, it's at home, it's all over the place. And the issue we're going to talk about today, which is a canker, is child sexual abuse. So now, I know some people are wondering, what at all is child sexual abuse and why should we be so concerned about it? How common is it? Does it really even exist within our environment? Child sexual abuse refers to a wide range of things. If you're in possession of childhood pornographic material, it's child sexual abuse. If you indecently expose yourself to a child, flashing genitals, flashing nipples, it is referred to as child sexual abuse. If you forcefully molest a child, it's childhood sexual abuse. If you show pornographic material to a child, it's also childhood sexual abuse. If you take videos of a child, if you download from the internet pictures of child sexual abuse, this is all child sexual abuse. If it's inappropriate touching of a child, whether the child is clothed or unclothed, it doesn't matter. Inappropriate touching of a child is also referred to as child sexual abuse. And like I already said, penetrative sex is also referred to as child sexual abuse. All these things come together as child sexual abuse. So if you look at the things that come together as child sexual abuse, you realize that then it is more common than you would like to think or imagine. How common is it really? Can you believe that 1 in 5 women have been sexually abused? That's 20% of the female population. Think about any 100 women you know, 20 of them have been sexually abused as a child. When it comes to men, about 10% have been sexually abused as a child. It is this common. I know some people think that males do not get sexually abused, but I know so many instances of boys who have been sexually abused by women and by men. One boy that I had in my clinic, he was brought in because he was having a discharge from the anus, and his mother couldn't understand why. He was about 10 years. So when we examined him, we realized that the whole anus, there were tears and cracks, and it was infected. Sorry to be so graphic, but this is the reality. So then we asked the boy what had happened, and he said that he had traveled over the Christmas holidays to spend Christmas with his cousins, and his older cousin, a male, had sodomized him. This is child sexual abuse, and this is how common it is. There's another issue of one person who, she was bathing her son, and her son, a little boy, maybe 3 or 4 years old, he said, Mommy, won't you suck my poppy? And his mother said, suck your poppy. Why? Then he said, because it's toffee. When Auntie Araba, and Auntie Araba is the house help, when Auntie Araba is bathing me, she always sucks it. She says it's sweet and she sucks it. She says it's toffee and so she sucks it. This is childhood sexual abuse. While the mother is away going to work, her maid, her house help, is sexually abusing the child. So child sexual abuse occurs, both males and females. Don't think that, I have sons and my house help is a female, therefore he will not be sexually abused. Don't think that I have daughters, my house help is a male or is a female, she will not sexually abuse these children. Childhood sexual abuse is common in our environment. It's commoner than we like to think. It is commoner than we like to talk about. And it's an issue that really needs to be addressed. When we were talking about childhood sexual abuse once during a conference, one woman said that her children are only at home, they don't go out, therefore her children cannot be sexually abused. That's a myth, because it's only about 10% of people who abuse children. Let me rephrase this. Only about 10% of sexual abusers are not known to the child. As in, it's only 10% of cases in which you have a complete stranger abusing the child. Only 10%. In about 90% of cases, the child knows the abuser, as in it is a family member, a cousin, a brother, an uncle, an auntie, a house help. It is someone who the child knows. So you don't have to go out to go and be abused. You can be abused as a child within your home, within the place that is supposed to be your safe place, a place that you're supposed to find comfort. You can be abused within that place. I was recently discussing an issue with another doctor, and we were discussing a child who had been abused. She doesn't live with her parents. She lives with another man and his wife and their children. And that man who she's living with as their house help is sexually abusing her. Since the age of 14 till she was 16 years of age, he's been sleeping with her. Even when his wife is around, he takes her out to a hotel and then he goes to sexually abuse her. This is how common child sexual abuse is. You don't have to be out there to go and be raped, to go and be defiled. It can come to you within the confines or within the comfort of your home. It doesn't have to only be within your home environment. It can also be at school. Teachers, headmasters. One child that I was managing, she was being sexually abused by her headmaster. He calls her into his office and then he puts his fingers in her privates, and then he says that when she's refusing, he says that, oh, don't worry. Your other classmates, they all like it. I do it to them. They all like it. They all enjoy it. So don't worry. It's nice. You will like it. Her headmaster, position of trust, somebody she knows, he's abusing her. So this is child sexual abuse. It is real. It is commoner than you think. And it can be at your doorstep. So which kind of kids are more likely to be sexually abused? We'll talk about that on another occasion. And which kind of kids or which kind of adults are more likely to sexually abuse a child? Or how do you spot somebody who can sexually abuse a child? We'll talk about that in the second part of this series of child sexual abuse. Now I want us to talk about how you can pick up whether your child has been sexually abused or not. Now listen carefully. Child sexual abuse can present in a number of ways. It can present, you may not see it physically, but by the way the child is behaving, you may realize that something traumatic has happened to this child. Emotionally, you may have a child who's now withdrawn, who's depressed, not like your child usually is. You should begin to think, has something happened to the child? A child can regress. A child who maybe has stopped wetting the bed at night may all of a sudden start wetting the bed when she sleeps. The child may withdraw from certain people. You may realize that there's a particular brother or uncle. When he comes around, the child doesn't want to go near him. One of the patients that I was dealing with, it was sad, but this was how it was like. There was a pastor living in her mother's apartment. Her mother had many rooms and she had rented out some. So there was a pastor living in one of these rooms. And this pastor would always call her to come and wash his clothes, to come and cook for him, and he would sexually abuse her. So when he calls the girl to come and the girl doesn't want to go, then the mother will be yelling at her and even beat her up that pastor is calling you and you're not going. Not knowing that the reason the girl didn't want to go was all because when she goes, the man would sexually abuse her. So if you realize that your child is withdrawing from a particular adult, she doesn't want to go near some uncle when he comes to visit, you should be a little bit suspicious. If the child can speak, find out from the child what is going on. The child may not confess, or I shouldn't even use the word confess, but the child may not speak up because such people normally tell the child that if you talk about it, you will die. Your mother will die. Something terrible will happen to you. And you know how children are, they believe what they are told. So the child will really believe that if I tell anyone that uncle is abusing me, mommy will die. I love mommy. I don't want mommy to die. Therefore, let me keep quiet and let me endure it as it is. That's the thinking of the child, and it's very sad. So we talked about behavioral and emotional things. You may have a child who's depressed, who is crying a lot, who is withdrawing from certain adults. All these things should make you think something has happened to your child. Also, you may have a child who now is not doing so well in school. Initially, she may have been doing very well in school, 80s, 90s, but now she's barely making it through. Think to yourself, what has happened to my child, which is why now she's not doing so well in school as before. These are all signs that you may pick up at home that a child has been abused. A teacher, you may also pick up some of these signs in your students and probe into it and find out what is going on within the home environment or even in school. Now let's talk about some physical signs, some things that you can find on the body of the child. Now if it is a girl, you may realize that the hymen is broken. It's easier to think of it like this. Sometimes parents, mothers especially, as you're bathing your child, you realize that's where the vagina is. You realize that now it looks like it's become widened, and it looks like that there are tears at the sides or there are tears around it. Okay, these should let you think that something has gone on. You compare to initially it didn't used to be that big, but now when I look at it, it looks much bigger than before. Probe further, find out whether something has happened. You could alternatively bring the child to the hospital, and we who are experienced can have a look at it and know whether the child has been sexually abused or not. Sometimes you may have a vaginal discharge. Sometimes you may have a sexually transmitted infection. It may show that the child has been sexually abused. If it's fresh, you may even have bleeding from the vagina. You may have bruising around the vagina. You may have bruising on the thighs, all showing that the child has been forcibly abused, sexually abused. You may also have trauma on the thighs or something that shows that the child really struggled. You may have such things, and they will help you know that this child has been sexually abused. In addition, especially in the males or even in a tiny female, you may have tears of the anus. So they may have tried penetrating the anus and there will be tears. There may be discharges. The whole anus may become deformed. A couple of years back, one terrible 31st night, one of my doctors called me. He actually called me, I think, on the 1st, on the 2nd, that a baby, and a 1-year-old, 3-month, had been brought to him. And her anus had been totally destroyed. Totally destroyed. She was brought to him half dead because the mother was at a prayer camp, and the father realized that he couldn't take care of this baby at home. So he took the baby to the mother at the prayer camp. So during the 31st night watch night service, as they were praying, the mother was with the baby and realized that the baby was asleep. So she went to put the baby in her bedroom or where she was staying, and then came back to the program to continue praying. When after about an hour or two, she went back to look to check up on the kid, and she realized that the child was nowhere to be found. They mounted a search, they went on a search, what's the word? They started looking for the child, and then found the child outside in some bushes somewhere. The child was so cold. You know how cold 31st night is. The child was so cold, almost frozen to death. And they realized that the child had been sexually abused, and they brought the child to the doctor in the hospital. The whole anus, I can't show you pictures of it, but I still have the picture. I can't show you the pictures. It was that traumatic. When I showed it to the police commander, he actually began shedding tears. And this is a grown man who has seen all sorts of things. He actually began shedding tears. This child had been sexually abused. So the anus can be used, especially in sodomy. So you want to examine the anus. You may see cracks, you may see tears, you may see foul smelling discharge coming from the anus. All these things should alert you that maybe this child has been sexually abused, and therefore we need to intervene. What are some of the long-term consequences of child sexual abuse? There are a number of them, ranging from psychological to physical and neurological damage. Psychologically, such children can have post-traumatic stress disorder. They may grow up with deviant behavior. That reminds me, when it comes to picking up a sign of a child who has been abused, there are 2 more things I should have mentioned. The child may become overly precocious, overly sexual, and it's abnormal. You realize that now the child is acting in a sexual way. She's walking about in a sexual way. Or sometimes when she's drawing she's drawing pictures. She draws pictures of intimacy When she's standing up and she's dancing, she dances in a sexual way. This should alert you that this is not just normal apalabonism, as in a naughty child, but maybe the child has been sexually abused. The other thing that I should have mentioned was that you may have children who now are overly protective of their younger siblings. So when their younger sibling is going to a certain adult, a certain male or a certain female, the child is overly protected. The child doesn't want them to go. It may be because the child has been sexually abused. So these are other things that you could look out for that may lead you to pick up sexual abuse in your child or in a child who is within your care. Now, I was talking about some of the effects. You can have post-traumatic stress disorder. You may also have children who are now having sleep deprivation. A child who has now regressed. The child was growing but now has regressed developmentally. Now she wets her bed. Now she thumb sucks. Now she does things that a younger child should do that an older child shouldn't be doing. All these things may be some of the psychological consequences of child sexual abuse. You may also have depression in the child, or even as she grows up into adulthood. Sometimes these children, when they grow up into adulthood, their relationships with the opposite sex are not as they should be, all because of the trauma that they have faced as a child. Physically, you may have pregnancy, you may have sexually transmitted infections, even HIV. I've seen a couple of cases of HIV that was through sexual abuse. The child ended up with HIV. And then you also have trauma. Sometimes they hold the child down so forcibly that they end up even damaging the child, breaking the legs, breaking the arms, damage to the anus, damage to the vagina, all those things that we already talked about. And even there's neurological damage. Some studies are showing that the effect of the sexual abuse actually has a structural damage effect, or it structurally damages the brain of the child. So child sexual abuse has such long-term consequences that you and I shouldn't just sit down and let children be abused. Unfortunately, many adults don't like to address the issue of child sexual abuse. They talk about collective shame. If I take the abuser to the police, to DOVSU, that's the domestic violence unit, people in the society will begin pointing fingers at me, at my family, at my child. People in the society will say, why am I trying to bring down such a big and noble man? The father of one of the cases of child sexual abuse that we had, it was a pastor who had abused this girl, 14-year-old. And the father said he didn't want to disgrace the pastor. Your child's whole life is being destroyed. And the father says he didn't want to disgrace the pastor. Another kid that I had in the village, it was the headmaster who was abusing the child. The child's father said, sorry, if he takes the headmaster to the police, everybody in the village will say, why has he brought down such a noble man? So therefore, they want to suffer in quiet. He wants his child to suffer in quiet. It's unacceptable. It is wrong. And we shouldn't allow such perpetrators to be on the streets, abusing more and more of our children, taking away the childhood of our children. It is so wrong. It is unacceptable. If you're a parent, if you're a teacher, if you're a guardian, if you're a clinician, a doctor, a nurse, if you are watching me today and you know of a child who is being sexually abused, please don't sit down and watch it. Don't sit down and watch it happening and say, I don't want to disgrace anybody. I don't want to get involved in any situation. Please, you have to get up and defend the rights of the child. God puts you in that position for a purpose. Maybe to save the life of this child. Maybe to safeguard the future of this child. Don't say that I don't want to disgrace somebody. I don't want to cause somebody's whole livelihood to be taken away from him. And so therefore, I'm going to sit down and watch it happen. I'm going to turn a blind eye to it. I'm going to shut my mouth. No, it is wrong. It is wrong. Even in certain countries, if you know that some child is being abused and you don't say anything, you can also be taken on by the law. That is what should happen, because you must not sit down and condone what is wrong. You must not sit down and watch what is going on you must not sit. I'm getting so emotional that I can't even speak right. You must not sit down and watch a child's whole life be destroyed. If you saw somebody walking in front of an articulator, would you sit down and watch? Would you say, well, I like the articulator driver. Well, the articulator driver is my friend, therefore he can knock down this innocent person, and it's not a big deal. It is a big deal. You would intervene, you would jump in, you would save the child from that situation. You would wave, you would shout, you would let the articulator driver stop so that you can rescue the child. So why is it that when it comes to childhood sexual abuse, we turn a blind eye? In the churches, we turn a blind eye to this. It is unacceptable. Childhood sexual abuse is wrong. Let us get up and intervene. Let us save the lives of little children. Let us make sure that our little children are safe, to have a normal childhood, and to grow up to be the persons that they need to be, to grow up to fulfill all the potential that is within them. So I'll end the first in the series of childhood sexual abuse here, and in the next series I'll talk about how to pick up somebody who's likely to abuse a child, how to pick up children who are more likely to be abused than other children, and what needs to be done for a child who is being sexually abused. So click the subscribe button, and if you have any comments, any questions, just drop them in the comments or questions section below, and we'll come back and address and talk a bit more about childhood sexual abuse. Stay blessed and protect that child who you are caring for. Goodbye.